Hi everybody! Today I'm going to be showing you how to use the image trace tool to trace images in Illustrator. Let's get started. First, we're going to need our proper files, whether they be Savage files or JPEGs. I personally like Savage files because they have a memory built into them about layered files. So the program will see those layerings and have a semi-understanding of what's going on. So we want to open with Illustrator. So now that we have our image loaded in, let's go ahead and turn on the transparent backgrounds. That way we know what is actually there and what is not. So show transparency grid under view. And you'll see that this image comes with a white background. We want to open up our image trace tool here. If not available there, open up Window, Image Trace, right here. And then of course, if it's already preloaded in, you can also find Image Trace up here. So we're going to open up our Image Trace here and select the settings we want. So we're looking at a colored image. It's also important to note that we want to make sure that preview button here is checkmarked, so that way we can see live what's going on in our image trace. So with the limited color palette, we want to open that up and go full tone, and we'll open up our swatches to 100 for the image, allowing us to see 100 different tones or 100 different color samples for the image to use, giving it that most in-depth view of this photo or image that you're trying to trace. The lower that number is, the more basic, toony, or other appearance it might have. So as you see from its previous state, how much more detailed this image is now. Now, if we draw that back to, let's say, 70, what's the next thing we want to do? Well, if it isn't open already, hit this advance arrow key to open it up, and select Ignore White to help get rid of the white background that's behind this image. Now, it's odd that we don't see much of a change here, even though we should have, but if that doesn't work for you, there are other ways to get rid of the white background. So it seems like the image doesn't see the white background as white. Good news, there's always a workaround, and I can show you how that's done later on. But for now, let's focus on what's in the tool panel, because once we expand the image, we can't get access to this panel again. So here we have, underneath our advanced, our paths, curves, noise, and methods. So the image that's currently selected is uptuning, which creates cutout paths, which is what I've been showing you thus far. But if we go over into overlapping, create stacked paths, as you notice, the white background has returned, and ignore whites is no longer a selectable option, so it's not ideal if you are to use this unless if you already have the background removed. Let's go back to our previous method. And now we can select ignore whites again to get rid of that white background. Now let's direct our focus onto the paths. So the higher this number is, the more paths there will be, and the more dynamic our shapes will become. And now after its quick adjustment, you'll notice nothing has really changed, because there's really no reason to touch this unless it really looks bad. And increasing that path number does nothing to favor the image and brings a harder workload onto the computer, so mess with it when you need it, when you need to. But what if we take it into the opposite direction? You'll now notice there's smoother paths from what was before. But to help bring into reference, let's focus on this leg here. So pay close attention to these shapes as I bring this back up to 50. As you notice from before, the image looks a whole lot more dynamic, or our shapes look a lot more dynamic and more form-fitting. So you might be asking, what does the corners do? Well, they really don't do much in this image. You'll see it have a higher impact on an image, let's say a cartoon outline of some sort of famous cartoon. But let's focus on the noise. What the noise will do is the higher that number becomes, the tighter our shapes will become on that outside edge, creating a tighter image, which is good. So if you click on any of these here, these are set by Adobe as presets for the image trace tool. So high color, basically what we're pretty much already at if we were to click it. The low color, if we select that, it will automatically set our defaults to a more basic what we had at the beginning of this. Maybe lower quality. Or a more cartoon-like abstract image. Then of course we have Grayscale, which will take the image straight into a gray scaling, so black and white and everything between. And here, as you see, it's now in that grayscale setting. And it's still highly detailed, and of course we can always add more values to that grayscaling to give it that more detailed structure to it. And as you see now, you got more of those highlights and shadows entering the image now to show that more in-depth image from what was before. And black and white, as it states, will be black and white. That's like if you're working in a more extreme or you're trying to get shadows and whatnot in an image, and manipulating its opacity level will help. And of course there is outline, which will outline every shape that the image trace will generate to create the final Illustrator image. Now that's a poor example. As you see here, you get this very sketchy image-like line material that's just not what we're needing. This obviously doesn't work well with this image. So we'll go back to our auto color. It will readjust everything back to what we had in our custom. So what you saw there is in the preview, view tracing results with outlines. So that's kind of like its image and everything grayed out. Now if we pump the color tone straight up, 70 again, get in that range again, you'll see that number of different colors be ramped up, as well as all the other intricate inlines. And as you see here, the image outline has been extremely saturated or bloated. But if we go back to tracing results, you can see that image is now back in depth. So as you see here in the advanced bar, snap curves to line is now off. So if we zoom in, you'll see that our shapes are rounded, and if we go to tracing results and trace results with outlines, you'll see how that image looks, or how these images will be pumped out. Now if we hit snap curves to lines, although there isn't a dramatic change in value or shapes, but you probably notice that things are a little bit more straighter and flatter than it was before. and it just helps keep the image more straight and geometric. Like, it's not a huge difference, but a difference nevertheless. Now let's go back to tracing results. Click our ignore whites because that's good practice. As you see, the ignore whites didn't change much at all, but we're reaching the point where we are about to go into object, expand, make sure objects and fills are both checkmarked, and click OK. Now the image is set into a full set, and if we click the white background, we should be able to just get rid of it. Now, it's not extremely obvious now, but if we draw a black screen behind it, you'll be able to see what ignoring whites can do to your image if you're not paying close attention. As you can see, there are a couple of blank spots within the image, and that's because image trace are those tones as pure white. So you probably noticed by now the image trace tool on the side here is grayed out because it's no longer seeing that Savage or JPEG file that you were tracing to begin with. Now, if we open up our group under layer 1, group again, you can see all the little shapes that comprises this image into the one solid image we see now. And if we try selecting a single part, so this one area highlights this one shape and color. So how many shapes are generated with this? It's really hard to say just by opening and scrolling through all this. Now that you have the image trace, you may be asking, what can I do with it now? And there's several directions you can go. Whether it's placing the image within a larger image to create a scene, or tossing on a few filters, or whatever your heart's desire might be to do with this image.